Orders came down with no preamble. "Objective," Colonel Harlan said, tapping the map spread over the hood of a jeep. "Concrete pillbox, Gustav line, tonight. Zimmerman breaches." John blinked. "Already? I've barely begun." Harlan's eyes were cold. "War does not wait for polish, Captain. You'll go as you are." On the bench nearby lay the altered suit, leather stitched tighter, steel plates cinched close. Improvements, they said. But the new mask, black leather, stretched smooth, round goggles for eyes, made him look like some faceless insect. John pulled it on anyway, breath echoing in the hollow space. He didn't complain. Night cloaked the hills. The Rangers crept forward through ditches and brush, rifles ready, demolition charges slung. Ahead, the pillbox hunched out of the earth, its machine gun already sweeping the field with fire. Tracers lanced the dark, raking the ground in deadly arcs. They pressed into the dirt, pinned. "Can't get close," Callahan hissed. "They'll mow us down." Then his hands snapped toward John. "Zimmerman, move!" John rose from the ditch and ran. Bullets sparked against his chest plate, punched splinters from his arms. He staggered once, then threw himself against the pillbox wall. The MG muzzle dipped, searching. With a grunt, John lunged sideways, seized the barrel housing, and shoved. Metal screeched as he forced it inches off its aim. The torrent of tracers slashed harmlessly into the sky, streaking across the clouds instead of the Ranger line. Shouts rose inside, German voices barking. Pistols cracked through the slit, rounds hammering into his chest and shoulders. He gritted his teeth, splinters flying, but he held on. Weiss charged forward, satchel charge in hand. He slammed it into the embrasure beneath John's grip, yanked the fuse, and dove back. John released the gun and hurled himself sideways as the pillbox roared. Concrete shook. Smoke and fire belched from the gap. The machine gun went silent. The Rangers surged past him, rifles sweeping, finishing the job with grenades and shouts. Green flares shot up from the ridge, a signal for the waiting regiment. Within minutes, infantry poured through the gap, boots and tanks grinding past. Some glanced at John, cracked mask, suit shredded, wood gouged and smoking, and crossed themselves. Others shouted thanks before hurrying on. Weiss clapped him on the shoulder as the last wave passed. "Took everything they threw and still stood. I'll take that over polish any day." Callahan shook his head, half disbelieving. "Suit looks like it's been through a meat grinder. Man still inside breathes. Can't argue with that." Ellsworth scribbled furiously. "Objective secured. Suit integrity failed." John stood amid the smoke and dust, straps dangling, plates torn loose. The black mask cracked across its lenses. His first mission was done. John and the Rangers were summoned unexpectedly to Naples. The HQ map room was dim and smelled of sweat. Generals bent over papers, voices low and urgent. John and the Rangers marched in, his black mask still cracked across the lenses, the plates of his ruined suit dangling like shed bark. In the corner sat an old woman wrapped in a threadbare blanket, a dented mug of tea steaming faintly in her bandaged hands. Her hair was white, her face lined with strain, her faded blue robes filthy and torn. She hadn't spoken since arrival, only stared at the floor as if waiting. The colonel was mid-sentence when her head lifted. Her eyes swept the room, lit upon John, and widened. She rose, unsteadily, the blanket sliding from her shoulders. "You!" Her voice trembled. The generals fell silent. She limped forward, ignoring protests, and reached for John's hand. Into it, she pressed a sliver of wood. "You must be the one responsible for this." Her eyes glistened. John's heartwood surged with recognition. He bowed his head, voice rough. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice cracked, and she tenderly wrapped her arms around him and sobbed into his chest. He awkwardly embraced her back. "I didn't think anyone would help." The men watched as she wept into his arms. John felt nervous at being embraced by what he assumed was a witch. After a time, she pulled away and wiped at her tears. "Show yourself, please." John glanced toward Colonel Harlan. The man's jaw worked once. Then he gave a curt nod. "Go on." Slowly, he removed one glove, then unbuckled the straps and lifted away the battered mask. The room held its breath. The woman's face lit with joy. "Oh, my dear boy!" She cupped his face with her bandaged hands, eyes shining despite the grime. "What a treasure! What a miracle!" John, flustered, asked softly, "Are you all right, ma'am?" He had not expected one the Nazis feared to be so grandmotherly, so kind. Her smile warmed, though her hand shook. "I am now, thanks to you. A very clever solution." Then her gaze hardened, and she lowered herself into a chair. Her voice turned grave as she faced the generals. "You want answers. Then you will listen. You wish to know what those beasts have found." "Yes," one general said sharply. "We are desperate for any clue why our communications are compromised. Captain Zimmerman hoped as much when he proposed your rescue." She regarded them a long moment. "I am Fay, what mortals have sometimes called a fairy. I help the downcast and defeated change their fates. I am godmother to those I help. I was captured, attempting to rescue children from the camps." Murmurs rippled. One officer stiffened. "We've heard rumors of those places. The reports sound exaggerated." Her gentle face twisted with pain. "Exaggerated?" Her voice shrill and cracked. "It's all true. Genocide turned to industry. Men, women, children, driven through slaughter as if they were raw material. Machines of death, perfected." Tears slipped down her cheeks. The room fell into heavy silence. She drew a shuddering breath. "I trained my wand so it could not be abused. They wished to recharge it with the magic that naturally flows through me, so I dispersed that as well. It cost me dearly. It has made me nearly mortal. They tortured me for the words that would waken it. I even had to watch as they—" Her voice broke. She covered her face, sobbing. John knelt beside her, steady arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to say it." "I must," she gasped, straightening, voice suddenly bold. "I must bear testimony so that justice will be swift and exacting." She spoke on, describing fragments of what she had endured. Hardened generals paled. One muttered, "Unthinkable! No man alive would." "Only the godless," she said fiercely. "Only monsters." Another general cleared his throat. "We are pushing into Germany as fast as we can, but they're counterattacking too quickly. It's as if every move we make is already known." "We have no secrets left to us," added an intelligence colonel grimly. The war room felt sour with frustration. "It's not just intelligence problems. Our luck is freakishly bad in the last month. Convoys mislaid, good rations spoiled as soon as the air touches it. Drops scattered like chaff. Our intelligence is useless," one colonel barked. Another officer muttered darkly. "Rifles jamming in unprecedented batches. Good bridges collapsing as soon as they're built. Couriers wandering in circles. Too many accidents to be chance." The fairy godmother's eyes narrowed. Then her face went slack with sudden realization. "Oh, dear." "What?" demanded Harlan. "What's oh dear?" She leaned back, weary but certain. "I think I know. If your secrets are out, even as you speak them, then your enemy may have mirrors, mirrors of power. With them, your plans are naked to their eyes." The room tensed. "Mirrors? Explain." She lifted her empty mug toward a startled general who dutifully poured more tea. She smiled faintly, then grew serious. "Long ago, monarchs possessed enchanted mirrors. Each carried different gifts, some to reveal, some to speak, some to deceive. If the Reich holds even one," her gaze darkened, "then your every move is being watched." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And the mounting misfortunes? Not accidents," she said at last. Her voice was calm, but the chamber stilled around it. "There is a pattern to these incidents. A sorceress could weave such threads. Nudges, small pulls at fate. They seem like bad luck, but they are not." The men exchanged uneasy looks. "So what do we do?" an officer asked. "Can we stop it?" The fairy godmother's gaze lowered to the map of Europe, then rose again, steady. "The bad luck will persist until the sorceress herself is stopped, but there are ways to blunt her reach. Old ways, simple things men once carried without knowing why." She let the silence stretch, then added, "Rabbit's feet, horseshoes, four-leaf clovers painted on equipment, charms of iron or silver. Call them superstition if you like, but in their roots lies truth. They will not end her, but they can turn aside the edge of her spell." The room shifted uneasily. Hardened generals looked at one another, muttering about good luck charms in the same breath they spoke of tanks and artillery. It sounded ridiculous. And yet, the weight of the fairy godmother's calm and the presence of a living puppet made it sound anything but. "Then how," Ellery demanded, "do we fight an enemy that sees through our walls? Our own plans are useless before we even draft them." Weatherford, the intelligence colonel, muttered darkly, "If they're listening now, then this whole meeting is a liability." The fairy godmother's gaze swept the room, then settled on John. Slowly she took his hand, folding her frail bandaged fingers around his wooden palm. "No mirror can see truth unbent, unless it has free passage," she murmured. "What they have is power unchecked, but power can be veiled." Her eyes fluttered closed. A faint glow stirred where her skin touched John's. He stiffened. The sensation of falling surged through him. He planted his stance to keep his balance. She whispered words no one caught. The glow gathered, and then, with a tap of her hand, it flowed into the dented mug before her. The men's eyes bulged at the visible manifestation of real magic. The mug looked no different, still humble tin, still dented on the rim. She slid it to the middle of the table. John yanked his hand free and clasped it in alarm. "What did you do to me?" She glanced up. "I'm sorry. I should have asked first. I borrowed a little magic from you." She gestured to the mug. "Set one of these wherever you speak your secrets," she said. "So long as it rests on the table, the mirrors will see nothing but smoke and silence. Harmless, ordinary things, mugs. Even if stolen or lost, they will give nothing away." The generals leaned in, brows knit. "You're saying this standard issue mug can blind them?" She smiled faintly. "Not blind, only curtain. Curtains are enough. You men know the power of a curtain. A stage show, a campfire shadow. Curtains hide the truth until the right moment." Harlan's voice was taut. "How many?" Her eyes crinkled. "As many as needed." She looked to John. "So long as I have you. Your resonance feeds the weave. Without you, I am a candle guttering. With you, I can craft dozens, so long as you consent to the use of your magic." The Rangers glanced at John. He rubbed the hand she touched anxiously. "The Germans took magic out of me, and it turned me back into wood." She nodded knowingly. "A violent and uncontrolled draw such as that damaged your flesh-giving enchantment, but small controlled draws can be regenerated by your magical body without lasting side effects." He considered her cautiously and glanced to the men gathered. "If these things really stop the German surveillance, then by all means." He offered his hand again. She took John's hand again, her blue eyes bright despite the weariness in her face. "There is something else I can do for you. You are strong already, my boy, but you need more than plates and straps." Her free hand hovered in the air, her voice lilting into a sing-song rhythm. Around John's frame, the shredded remains of his suit shimmered, threads pulling together into sleek new lines, canvas hardened into smooth black leather, seams vanished, the mask reshaped into something less insect and into a knightly helmet. The suit settled over him, tactical, textured, even sculpted with muscle tone disguising his inhuman joinery. She released his hand, and he shook off the drain. John flexed his fingers inside the glove, now lengthened into a gauntlet. "Wow, that's impressive." He laughed giddily, then caught himself, coughed, and stood straighter. "This one will move with you, not against you. It will frighten your enemies, comfort your friends, and it will last." John touched the leather at his shoulder. He looked up in awe, his eyes shining appreciatively. "Thank you, ma'am." The fairy godmother patted his arm. "An outstanding wardrobe is what I do best," she winked. "I want one," a ranger muttered under his breath. Another quipped, "The butt on that thing looks slappable." Several of the men choked back laughter. John's ears went scarlet under the wood grain. The fairy godmother patted his arm. "Well, armor ought to be both practical and attractive," she cackled outright. The generals surged to their feet, excitement flashing across every face. "If you can make mugs, blind the mirrors, what else?" Ellery barked. "Could you cloak a regiment?" "Or a convoy," Weatherford pressed, eyes gleaming. "Move whole divisions unseen." "Or sabotage the mirrors themselves." The fairy godmother raised her bandaged hand, her voice weary but sharp, cut through their babble. "Enough." They froze. "You mistake me for a conjurer without consequence. What I have done here is restore balance. The Reich tipped the scales with their mirrors, and now the scales are leveled again. But if we go further, if you ask me to twist the world to your favor, balance will answer in ways you will not like." Her words hung like a sentencing. The room shifted, restless. "I will guard you," she said softly, gesturing to the enchanted mug on the table. "But I will not wage your war for you. That is not my place, nor any phase. Now, bring a number of these, and we two together can enchant them." The men scattered, dumping out coffee and clattering the mugs onto the table. A couple dozen dented and scratched mugs sat lined up on the briefing table like soldiers awaiting inspection. The generals looked at them with thinly veiled impatience. They needed weapons, not crockery. The fairy godmother rose slowly from her chair, bandaged hands trembling but steady with purpose. "This will do," she murmured. She coaxed John to join her, and they joined hands. She touched the first mug, eyes twinkling as though addressing an old friend. She sang in a lilting cadence, half nursery rhyme, half prayer. "Clink of tea or soldier's brew, whispered words be lost from view. Let no spy hear a single clue." Her voice rang bright against the dim, smoke-stained rafters. The men shifted uncomfortably, a few smirking. One brigadier muttered under his breath, "We've put the fate of Europe in the hands of a grandmother with jingles." She moved down the line, repeating. By the last, the whole table glowed briefly, then hushed into a strange silence. The air felt heavy, as though the walls leaned close to listen, and heard nothing. Weatherford swallowed. "Good heavens! They can't see us now, can they?" The fairy godmother lowered herself back into her chair, weary but smiling. "Not a word, not a whisper, not a breath. These will guard you, if you use them well." Then John swayed. The helmet slipped from his hand and clattered to the stone floor. He staggered against the table, knuckles scraping the surface. Before anyone could react, his legs buckled and he dropped heavily to the floor. "Captain Zimmerman!" Ellery barked, startled out of his composure. He and another helped John into a chair. The generals blinked, caught between alarm and impatience. "He has given all he can for now. He needs to rest and regenerate." John pressed a palm against his brow, every limb heavy as lead. His voice rasped low, embarrassed. "I'm fine, just weak." But his body betrayed him and slumped. He tried to flex his fingers and they barely responded. They felt inanimate. The loss of magic had literally edged him toward a lifeless puppet. The generals looked at each other. The excitement that had lit their faces moments before dimmed, sobered by the sight of their enhanced subject already drained. The fairy godmother's eyes softened as she braced John's shoulder. "You will recover, but now you see, every act of magic has its cost. I have restored what the Reich unbalanced with their mirrors. Ask for more than balance, and the backlash will be terrible." A colonel spoke gravely. "Ma'am, we thank you for this service. This at least makes it more of a fair fight." "In a fair fight, good always prevails," she said. The generals didn't waste time. They immediately began discussing how to mark and distribute the mugs, breaking into a din of chatter. They also debated what to do with their new ally. The fairy godmother turned to John and smoothed his hair back and helped balance him upright. She leaned close, her voice for him alone. "Don't worry, my boy. Your body will regenerate what was taken this night. Her tone was remorseful. You wish to be human again, I imagine. John's eyes lifted, desperate. Yes, please, I can't live like this. I have family. Her expression softened. What did you do long ago to earn that gift? He swallowed. Be brave, truthful, and unselfish. She nodded. And you did. That is why you were granted flesh. But now you are not a boy, John. You are a man. The stakes are higher. The cost is greater. Her voice steadied, solemn as a vow. To become whole again, you must embody more than those virtues. You must also embrace mercy, justice, forgiveness. These will be your trial. Hold to them, and in time, your humanity will be restored. The magic in you runs on light, and those virtues fuel the enchantment that causes transformation. John's gaze dropped to the sleek black suit gleaming faintly on his frame. She touched the armor at his chest. I must warn you, the suit magnifies all you are, not just the soldier. Your hidden nature will grow stronger too. All of your best attributes will be amplified, but if you succumb to despair or pride, it will magnify the darkness instead. John clenched his fists. So I just endure until the end. Her eyes softened. Yes, my boy, it will be so very hard, but it is the only way. The generals had reached their conclusion. She was too viable, too high a target. She would be moved under the highest secrecy, shipped west with the same protection reserved for defected scientists. John heard it all dimly, still weary in his chair. At last the fairy godmother rose, leaning heavily on the corner of the desk. She turned to him, eyes soft. We must part, my boy. They are right. The Reich will hunt me. But you, she brushed her hand over his shoulder, you must remain here where you are needed. John nodded, ever the dutiful soldier. She reached into her tattered robe and unclasped a small brass button, dull with age. Pressing it into his palm, she closed his fingers over it. This will pass unnoticed. To all others, it is scrap. To you, it is a voice. Press the face and speak when you cannot bear the silence. I will hear. John studied the tiny thing, brow furrowed. A button? Her eyes blinked. Buttons hold things together, even the broken. Think of it as fitting. For a moment her hand lingered on his, frail but steady. Remember, mercy, justice, forgiveness. That is your path home. Then the guards moved in. Papers shuffled, orders barked. Within the hour she would be spirited away, bundled onto a convoy bound for the Atlantic. John slipped the button into his pocket, heavy for its size. His new suit was close and comfortable around his body, but it was the button he felt most. The fairy godmother glanced back only once as they led her out. Her gaze found John, and she smiled. And then she was gone. John sat slumped in his chair. Generals and staff murmured in low voices, the adrenaline of revelation ebbing. One of the colonels grabbed one of the dozen mugs on the desk, poured himself from the percolator on the sideboard, sipped, and grimaced. Colonel, you're drinking out of our counter-surveillance tools. I'll give it back in a minute, he snapped. Blast this stuff. Every batch tastes different. Last month it was fine. Now it's like burnt chicory. Chocolate is just as bad. Another officer shrugged. Got a drink as well and dunked a biscuit into his own mug. They say the company started padding it with some new supplement, powdered barley or soy or something. Some civilian innovation to fortify the boys. He made air quotes. Supposed to stretch the beans, give more nutrition. A third officer snorted. Nutrition? I'd settle for it not tasting like ditch water. Can't see how it helps a man fight. The others chuckled, griping for a moment like tired commuters. Then the conversation slid back to convoys, code-breaking, and enemy movements. The carriers would be summoned, and the cups distributed with haste to any willing to believe. The chamber at Wibblesburg was already tense. Word of the Matrune's escape had reached them the morning after her disappearance. Colditz compromised. Vanished like magic. Now, a couple weeks later, the mirrors themselves rippled uselessly with smoke. "Again," the officer barked. "Show me Allied headquarters in Naples." Only smoke. Ryder stepped forward, voice calm. "You see the pattern. She has not merely escaped. She is active. She has equipped the Allies to match our magic." Himmler spun, dark eyes like glass. "I was told she was drained of magic, deprived of her wand." "Thermic energy can be found in some most unexpected places. I surmise she got her hands on just enough." Himmler's voice cut like a blade. "Then find her! If she has been taken west, sink every convoy, shoot down every plane flying across the Atlantic." The clerks bent frantically to their notes, fear humming in the chamber. Ryder alone was calm. He closed his notebook with a snap. "The Allies will be budged now. The curtain has been drawn. They will think themselves safe." He glanced at the smoke, then at Himmler. "They are wrong. The curse will soon fall, and even this will right itself." High in the Alpine mountains, a Fiat's engine sputtered to silence at the foot of church steps. It was no black staff car, no SS pennants, just a mud-spattered civilian saloon with student papers tucked neatly on the dashboard. The man who stepped out looked the part. Plain wool coat, scarf, wire-rimmed glasses fogged from the cold. A leather satchel hung at his side, stuffed with notebooks. He paused, taking in the thin smoke from cottage chimneys and the brittle air of the valley. Many were newer, some were rebuilt from the wreckage of the Great War. He found the elders huddled near the square's dry fountain, gossiping in low tones. Their eyes cut to him with cautious suspicion until he raised a hand politely. "Scusate," he said in smooth Italian. "I'm a student from Florence. I've come to record the oral traditions of the mountain villages before they're lost. This war, it has already taken so much." The elders exchanged looks. One old woman muttered, "Florence?" as if testing the name. He smiled faintly, producing a notebook and a fountain pen. "Stories of the old days, folklore, childhood tales. I only wish to preserve what will otherwise vanish." That thawed them a little. Slowly, they shifted on the bench to give him space. One man with a pipe asked, "What kind of stories?" "Whatever you know best," the student said warmly. "However, as I worked my way through the lower villages, one story kept coming up. They said I needed to come here, told me to ask about Giuseppe Zimmerman." A spark lit in the pipe smoker's eyes. "Ah, then you mean Geppetto. Little Joseph, that's what we called him." The others nodded. One chuckled softly. "Always with his tools. He carved wonders, that man. Clocks, toys, chairs, saints' figures for the chapel, and one more thing." The student leaned in, pen ready. "Yes?" The pipe smoker lowered his voice, though the square was empty. "A puppet, made of pine, carved so fine you could mistake it for a child. Then it walked. Called it Pinocchio." Another elder spoke, shaking her head. "Naive for his size, but who could blame him? He had only been born the day before, but good-hearted, yes." The woman beside her sniffed. "Giuseppe turned away just once. That's all it took. The boy was snatched by gypsies. Years later, the boy was tricked by traffickers. He and his friends were taken to an island. They barely made it out with their lives. Then Giuseppe and his boy had to confront an unearthly dogfish. The boy sacrificed himself to save his father. With methods we don't understand, he was revived. Geppetto later had him baptized." They answered in unison. "Giovanni Giuseppe. Giovanni, John for the saint. Giuseppe, Joseph for the father." The student tilted his head. "And Pinocchio?" The pipe smoker chuckled, puffing smoke. "Pet name, Little Pine Nut. It stuck." The student looked delighted and riveted. "But how was it done? How did the old man bring it to life?" The elders exchanged looks, some smiling nervously, others frowning. For a moment it seemed they would stop. Then the woman with the scarf leaned closer, whispering, "It was the star." The man with the pipe nodded gravely. "See,
"The wishing star. The priest said so. The blue fairy came and Giuseppe played under it."
The student's pen slowed. "Which star?" he pressed gently.
"Which constellation?"
The old man pointed a crooked finger toward the cold sky above the ridges.
"Sirius, in Canis Major, the bright one you see in the winter."
The student looked up, glasses glinting. He etched the name carefully in his notebook, underlining it twice. He closed the folio with a respectful nod.
"You have given me something precious. These stories will not be forgotten."
The elder smiled faintly, flattered, still believing he was only a harmless collector.
"You want to hear another one? I got one about a talking donkey."
They watched as he stepped back into the plain car and rattled away down the valley road. Inside the satchel, between notebooks and scraps, lay a leather folder embossed with the Reich seal. And in his mind, the aide was already rehearsing his report for Dr. Ryder. The puppet's name was Pinocchio, christened Giovanni Giuseppe, father called Geppetto. The blue fairy answered his wish beneath Sirius in Canis Major. The villa courtyard back in Naples was cracked and sun-warmed. A broken fountain crouched in the middle. Olive branches leaned over the walls, casting shifting shadows. The rangers had strung rope for climbing drills, stacked sandbags, and painted crude targets across one plastered wall. John stood in the center, armored in the black suit, no dangling straps, no fogged goggles, only smooth black leather and plates that curved like a knight's harness, sleek and fitted. His helmet was faceless, narrow slit like a Spartan's. For the first time since Castel del Monte, he didn't feel exposed. He felt impervious. "Run it again," Hartman barked. John vaulted the low wall, rolled and sprang up the sandbag slope. The suit moved with him, not against him. No clattering, no snags. He reached the rope, hauled himself upward, boots finding purchase as though the stone welcomed him. He was still recovering from the power drain, but he was rebounding quickly. The rangers exchanged glances and grudging approval. Ellsworth muttered, "Not bad. Almost looks like he knows what he's doing." John landed, dust kicking up. He straightened, voice lighter than they'd ever heard. "Careful, Ellsworth. Another compliment like that, and I'll think you're sweet on me." A ripple of laughter broke the stone-serious men. Even Callahan cracked half a grin. "Don't get cocky," Weiss growled. John tapped the chest plate with his knuckles. "Cocky? I'm invincible in this thing." He flexed, mock heroic. "Tell me I don't look like something out of a dime comic." "More like something a kid would draw with a crayon," one ranger shot back. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, friend." John smirked beneath the helmet. For the first time in months, his wooden grin wasn't restrained by shame. He was at ease, even razzing them back. The rangers drifted off toward their bunks, some still muttering about the day's drills, others too tired to rib him further. John lingered in the courtyard. He had no desire to remove even the helmet or gloves. They felt part of him. He'd never felt so comfortable. Boots scuffed behind him. A courier cut across the square, satchel slung over his shoulder. "Mail call," he sorted quickly, passing envelopes into the waiting hands. The courier halted when he saw John's raiment. "Wow! Ain't that the slickest thing since Clark Gable grew a mustache?" John chuckled as he accepted one battered envelope. "Wish I could take a picture with you," the courier lamented before he hurried away. The handwriting was uneven, eager. Raise. The paper was battered from a rough ride in a soldier's pocket. John opened it carefully. His dexterity was improving. He found alternative ways to overcome what he lacked in grip. "Dear Cap, it feels strange writing you like this when you used to sit 5 feet away, but I wanted you to know me and the boys are keeping steady. Nick's been doodling pictures of you since you left. Larry is nearly finished translating the Thomic notes, but the math has him stumped. A lot of physics. Camp feels quieter without you. Not just me, the other men. It shows, though they won't admit it. You kept us steady, even when the shells came close. Feels like the air's gone out a bit since you left. I don't say this to make you sad, sir, just to tell you you're missed, and prayed for, every night. Don't forget us when you're off doing hero work. We'll be waiting when you get back. Your friend, Ray. P.S. My boot's been staying on for the first time since Africa. My foot is healing. It's a miracle." Inside a small paper ripped from a notebook, Nick's art style had flawlessly captured John's cartoon face. The portrait depicted John giving a smiling side glance, the lighting idealized. He liked it. John folded the letter slowly, pressed it to his chest as if the words themselves could be absorbed. His smile, bright and easy in the suit hours earlier, now softened, aching at the edges. He slid the paper carefully into a pocket of the black suit under the chest plate, over his heartwood. For a long moment he just sat there in the dim courtyard, armored like a knight, but grounded by the ink of a boy's handwriting. The Rangers had returned to the front lines for their next mission. Their squad stood in the frosted dawn. John's new suit gleamed faintly in the weak light, his military patches added to the shoulders. The helmet, Spartan and knightly, his face concealed behind tinted glass. The view through it seemed to glow. Behind him the valley rolled gray, scarred by shell fire. Ahead, the farmhouse crouched on the slope like a fortress, walls pitted, shutters blasted to splinters. The orders were brief, scrawled across a field map in red grease pencil. Target: stone farmhouse north of San Pietro. MG nest. Harassing convoys. Neutralize. Hold. They'd done this kind of thing before, and it usually meant walking straight into an ambush. Every time the enemy had been dug in, machine guns already sighted, mortars waiting like they'd read the briefing themselves. But this morning, when the Rangers crept up through the orchard, there was nothing. No shots, no shouted warnings, no movements in the upper windows. The defenders, clueless of their approach. Weiss muttered, "They always knew before, not this time." John just frowned at the quiet fields. "Maybe," he said, "this is the mugs at work." "Captain Zimmerman, you're up front," Colonel Harlan said. His tone was half challenge, half test. "Let's see if that magic tailor of yours made you a soldier or a mascot." John only nodded, adjusting the helmet. The approach was quick and brutal. As soon as their movement was spotted, German fire opened from the windows, tracers scything through the olive trees. The Rangers scattered, hugging stone walls. John sprinted up the slope, bullets clanging and sparking off his armor. His boots churned mud. He hit the outer wall like a battering ram. Stone cracked, plaster rained. A grenade clinked on the ground near his feet. John scooped it up and flung it through the window before it could detonate. The blast tore the interior, German cries muffled by dust and rubble. "Move!" Harlan barked, and the Rangers poured in behind him. The fight inside was sharp, close. Muzzle flashes lit stairwells, boots thudded across beams. John tore a door from its hinges and used it as a shield, driving the defenders back. Within minutes, the last German had fallen. "Clear!" someone called. And then, a sound that didn't belong. Whimpering. Harlan froze, then silently signaled toward the floor. His men trained rifles on a cellar door, half hidden under debris. John pushed forward, lifted a shattered beam, and hauled the door open. Inside, huddled a dozen villagers, gray-haired farmers, shawled women, thin-faced children with eyes wide from smoke and terror. A baby cried, and the sound cut sharper than gunfire. "Civilians," John said, voice echoing in the helm. The Rangers cursed under their breath. One muttered, "We just turned their shelter into a war zone." The farmhouse shuddered. A shell burst outside, rattling the beams. German counterfire had already begun. "They'll try to take it back," Harlan snapped. "Positions! Zimmerman! Hold the cellar! Protect the civilians!" John descended. The civilians flinched at the sight of him. Faceless, towering, a figure in black, larger than life. Children shrank behind their mothers, whimpering. The helmet made him unknowable. The ground shook violently, dust sifting from the beams above. Cracks groaning in the stone. The children screamed, mothers clutching them tighter as artillery thundered outside. He loomed protectively, but to them he menaced. After some minutes of watching them cower, John slung his rifle across his back and lowered himself onto the floor. He sat cross-legged, hands open to show he meant no harm. He switched on his flashlight and aimed it upward. The pale glow washed across the vaulted ceiling, pushing back the dark. One little girl sobbed uncontrollably, piercing even through the din. She reminded him of Josephine, his own 5-year-old, endlessly curious, sneaking into cupboards, never still. His chest ached. He reached into his satchel. The faint crackle of a wrapper sounded against the boom of guns. Snapping the chocolate inside, he peeled it open. Holding it out to a mother, he said softly in Italian, "Vuoi un po' di cioccolato?" The mother hesitated, then took it, understanding his intent. She broke it apart and shared it. Slowly the crying softened. Children chewed, their small mouths busy, anchored by sweetness. John's voice followed, low and steady, directed to the parents. You've kept them safe this far. The walls will hold. The guns upstairs are ours. American. The woman inched closer to the light. A man spoke up. Your uniform doesn't look American-y. It's new. John knocked on the chest. Experimental. A woman began humming a lullaby. Another joined, voices wavering but brave. But the little girl, the one who reminded him of Josephine, still wept, her eyes fixed on him in terror. She buried her face in her mother's skirt. She was more scared of him than the war outside. They all were. Urged by some old instinct rooted in his wood, his gloved hands rose to the chin strap. John hesitated. Then he drew it loose. The helmet came away. Gasps rippled through the cellar. Mothers recoiled, whispering prayers, crossing themselves at the sight of his painted face, his carved features flexing with unnatural life. But the children's fear cracked like a shell, surprised and delighted by the sheer contrast of the friendly face hiding inside the menacing armor. They giggled and pointed. One boy clapped, "Un soldatino!" A toy soldier. The mothers hissed and tugged, but the little ones wriggled closer, reaching to touch his wooden cheek, to poke his nose. The more the parents whispered, "Diavolo!" the more the children laughed, for they saw only wonder. John's painted eyes softened. Shame that had burned him raw eased under their laughter. Innocence saw him clearer than any adult. He raised his hands gently. "Do not fear," he said in slow Italian, using a light raspy voice he reserved for his children. "I will tell you a story." The children hushed, crowding near. Even the parents held still. "There was once a puppet," John began, his voice carrying steady over the rattle of guns, "carved by a lonely man, small and comely. But one night," he tapped his chest with a wooden finger, "the puppet came to life. He wanted to be good, brave, and honest. He wanted to be real." "Like me?" a boy whispered. John's mouth curved faintly. "Yeah, like you. And though the world was hard and people feared him, he learned that when he helped others, when he protected the helpless, he was not just wood, he was more." The cellar had gone still. Parents exchanged wary glances, but the children leaned forward, soothed by his story. "And so, he fought for people no matter how afraid they were, because that is what makes a man real, what he chooses to do." Then a frail voice from the back, trembling. "Pinocchio?" The word struck John like a bell. His painted eyes snapped toward the speaker. An old woman, shawl drawn tight, her face furrowed with age. She stared at him, breathless. "I was a girl in Coladi," she murmured. "There was a story, a carpenter who carved a sun. Some said it was true, others said a fable, but I remember the whispers, the puppet who walked on his own." The mothers gasped, crossing themselves again, but the children only brightened, delighted at the fairy tale made real. John's throat worked. For a moment, words failed him. Finally, he whispered, "That name. I haven't heard it in decades." The woman leaned forward, eyes glistening. "Then it was true." John bowed his head, nervousness mingling heavy on his chest. The story he thought he had buried was alive and well. The little girl tugged his sleeve. "So you are toy soldier?" John smiled faintly, though his painted eyes shone. "No. Wooden man. Real soldier." Above them, rifles cracked, boots thudded, rangers shouted orders, but in the cellar, John sat cross-legged, children kneeling around him. When the reinforcements finally broke the siege, the farmhouse was scorched and half-shattered, but in the cellar, the children were calm. When the rangers called for him, John rose, helmet in hand. A girl tugged at his arm. "Will you come back?" she whispered. He swallowed. "I don't know." He looked at the villagers. "As soon as it's safe, get away from this place. Flee south." Then he sealed the helm over his face once more and climbed back into the war.